The year 2020 is an extremely difficult year for the whole world. COVID-19 pandemic will remain engraved in our hearts and memory forever. The budget 2020-2021 has been presented at this tough and difficult time. We still do not know how long COVID-19 pandemic will last or when a vaccine will be introduced. However, we do know that the impact of COVID-19 pandemic is very devastating and has caused havoc around the world. Before I turn to the budget itself, allow me, Mr. Speaker, sir, to say a few words on what has been happening around the world and in our country during the last few months. The world has witnessed an unprecedented sanitary crisis, the biggest we have known in more than a century. The COVID-19 pandemic has paralyzed the entire world, with more than 3 billion people having been locked down. The infection has spread at a stunning rate. We were almost defenseless in the face of such an unpredictable and highly contagious virus. One of the major challenges was the detection of infected persons. Surprisingly, many were those who did not show any symptoms despite being infected. This has contributed towards a quick spread of the disease. The world, I must say, was brought to its knees within days. None of us was prepared for such an unprecedented crisis, not even the wealthiest and most powerful countries such as UK, France, Italy, and America, amongst others. This pandemic has caused havoc, as I have said, around the world, and Mauritius has unfortunately not been spared. I'm deeply saddened by the loss of 10 of our fellow citizens due to this virus. I seize this opportunity to extend my heartfelt condolences to the bereaved families. Mr. Speaker, sir, the first cases of COVID-19 were detected in Mauritius on 18th March 2020. Our Prime Minister, Honorable Pravin Kumar Jagnnath, lost no time to respond to this critical crisis. He immediately took drastic measures, I must say, to prevent the spread of the disease. On 20th March, Mauritius was under a sanitary strict lockdown. On 23rd March, a curfew order was issued. Difficult decision indeed. Our Prime Minister took charge in time of the crisis. Even, I must say, our Prime Minister has been swift in action. He has taken, I must say, the right decision at the right time. We do recognize that these measures and actions have disrupted our daily life and the economy, but all these actions have to be taken to better protect our people. To reply to what Honorable Boulel said about the closure of our frontiers, I would like to mention that the first cases of COVID-19 were detected in Mauritius on 18th March. Decision was taken by our Prime Minister to close our frontiers on the next day itself, that is 19th March. And even before we detected cases in Mauritius, all flights from Shanghai were suspended as from 31st January itself. So I cannot understand Honorable Boulel when he said earlier that we have taken long to act. Is the closure of our frontiers on the next day of the first cases, of the first suspected cases, not quick enough, so I leave it to the House to appreciate. Mr. Speaker, sir, one of the top priorities of our government has always been to provide assistance and support to the most vulnerable. Ever since we took office in 2014, we have come up with a series of measures to provide our citizens with a more decent living. Our Prime Minister has always been mindful of the needs of the most vulnerable. And in such a crisis, what have we done? A series of measures has been taken by different ministries. Our government has adopted appropriate policies. In no time, a wage assistance scheme was put in place to provide financial assistance to companies to ensure that employees are paid their salaries during the lockdown. A self-employed assistance scheme was designed to assist self-employed persons who have suffered a loss of revenue as a consequence of the said lockdown. A COVID-19 Solidarity Fund was set up to collect funds to be used to help those affected by the said pandemic. It would have been difficult for us to deal with the aftermath of the pandemic without a robust and legal framework. Therefore, prior to the liftment of the confinement, our government has deemed it necessary to come up with the COVID-19 Miscellaneous Provisions Act 2020 and the Quarantine Act. I must say that these two acts will serve to chart the way forward post the pandemic. My ministry, with the support of other key ministries, has had to change the way of doing things to protect our elderly, to keep them safe indoors, to help vulnerable families. We adopted immediate actions such as distribution of food packs to 7,900 families eligible under the Social Register of Mauritius and to 19,779 elderly persons and persons with disabilities benefiting from a carer's allowance. We paid pension at home to around 58,665 beneficiaries. We did this for 2 consecutive months with the collaboration of Mauritius Post Limited. Payment to around 500 beneficiaries of social aid was also carried out at their residence by officers of my ministry. We have changed the mode of the vaccination exercise. Instead of asking the elderly persons to come to our centers, vaccination has been carried out through mobile caravans across the island. 108,583 elderly persons were vaccinated through caravans, and this exercise has been done in collaboration with the Ministry of Health. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, as you can see, throughout the crisis, our objective has been to shield and protect our elderly, to provide basic necessities to those in need. Well, if this is not proof of our goodwill, I wonder what else will be. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to comment on the present budget 2020-2021, the first budget of the Minister of Finance. I have no doubt this has been a challenging exercise in view of COVID-19 pandemic. In spite of this difficult time, the present budget, I must say, has struck the right balance between la relance économique et l'aspect social. This budget provides a roadmap to stimulate our country's economy, to modernize our healthcare sector, to continue caring for our elderly, and also to provide those who are at the bottom of the ladder with the means to come up out of poverty. It is hard not to acknowledge that a major part of the budget 2020-2021 is focused on social upliftment. This budget clearly addresses the needs of our most vulnerable citizens in a coherent and sustainable way. In fact, a major part of every budget presented by our government since 2014 has always been dedicated to social upliftment. The first things that come to my mind are measures such as the introduction of minimum wage, negative income tax, subsistence allowance for families living under the poverty line, and of course, the increase in basic pension. If our government had not taken all these measures, if we had not injected huge sums to provide financial assistance to vulnerable people, they would still be struggling hard to make both ends meet. Today, the minimum wage stands at $10,200 and the basic retirement pension at $9,000 instead of $3,623, Mr. Speaker, sir. From the time we took office in 2014 to date, the budget of the Ministry of Social Security has undergone massive increases from $13.9 billion in 2014 to $36.7 billion today. Let me now say a few words on some of the measures that concern my ministry, specifically the Social Security and National Solidarity Division. I have listened with great attention to Honorable Bulel and Honorable Yutim comments regarding the National Pension Fund. Maybe Honorable Bulel is not present, so can Honorable Bulel tell us where in the budget it is said that we will end the contributory pension? Where in the budget mention has been made that old age pension will be targeted? Let me, Mr. Speaker, sir, at this stage, eliminate all confusion. Let me reassure the House that we are not ending universal basic retirement pension. There will be no targeting in terms of universal retirement pension. This means that all those who turn 60 will continue to benefit from their universal retirement pension of 9,000 rupees. We have said that old age pension will become 13,500 before the end of this government mandate, and let me reassure the House and the population that we will honor our commitment. One must not forget that it is our government that has increased and aligned basic widow's pension and the basic invalidity pension from 3,267 to 5,000 in 2014. And in December 2019, we took the decision to bring this basic pension to 9,000 rupees. It was our government, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have always delivered on our commitment. Our track record, I must say, speaks for itself. Now, coming to the National Pension Fund and its assets. The National Pension Fund, as I understand, will continue to exist. All those who have contributed to the National Pension Fund so far will be paid their dues as and when they retire. As for existing beneficiaries who have already retired, they will continue to receive their monthly pension. The National Pension Fund will continue to invest its surplus fund, as has always been the case, with a view to maximize return. Let me stress that the assets of the NPF has always been the property of the workers and will always remain the property of the workers. Government will never claim ownership of the assets of the NPF, as some of the members may think. In fact, what we are doing, Mr. Speaker, sir, is moving towards a more progressive contribution system. The National Pension Fund is being replaced by the contribution sociale généralisée, which will be effective as from 1st September 2020. Employees earning up to 50,000 will therefore contribute 1.5%, and their employees will contribute 3% on their monthly salary. As for employees earning more than 50,000 rupees, their contribution will be 3%, and that of their employers 6%. However, contribution will therefore no longer be capped against a ceiling of 18,740, as is currently the case under the National Pension Act. This is an effort for a fairer, more equitable system for the future, Mr. Speaker, sir. All other basic pensions have known considerable increases. At this point, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is pertinent for me to mention that prior to December 2014, the basic widow's pension and the basic invalidity pension were less than the basic retirement pension, and necessary measures have been taken by government to align the two pensions, same as the basic retirement pension. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, sir, at this stage to move to another measure announced in the budget, visite médicale à domicile to persons between the age of 18 and 60 years. Initially, monthly domiciliary visits were provided only to children with disabilities below the age of 18 and to bedridden persons aged 75 and above. The House will recall that in the budget 2019-2020, this service was extended to bedridden persons aged 60 and above. Provision is being made in the budget 2020-2021 for the provisions of visite médicale à domicile to bedridden persons between the age of 18 and 60. And as we can see in the budget, an amount of, in the estimate, an amount of around 150 million has been earmarked for the implementation of this particular budget. I'm grateful to our Prime Minister as well as the Minister of Finance and his team for having acceded to this request, and now visite médicale à domicile to bedridden persons will be allowed for all people. Age now will no longer be an eligibility criterion to benefit from this service. I'm sure this measure comes as a great relief to many vulnerable families. Moving on, I would now wish to comment on the provisions made for the increase in the number of anti-influenza vaccines for the elderly and for children in special needs school from 75,000 to 150,000. Mr. Speaker, sir, the figure has doubled, an amount of 34 million as compared to 10 million for the last financial year has been allocated to my ministry for the purchase of the vaccine. We have noted recently that there is an increasing demand for this vaccine, and therefore there was a pressing need to respond to that need. I'm glad the Minister of Finance has agreed to our request, so now we will be in a position to extend this service to a larger number of elderly persons. Coming to the Social Integration Division of my ministry, Mr. Speaker, sir, the alleviation of poverty is a long process. We need to be realistic Unfortunately, even if we would have wished so, poverty cannot be eradicated overnight. But despite all the various challenges, our government is determined to reduce poverty to the extent possible. This is the very reason why our government initiated the Marshall Plan Against Poverty in 2016. Families living below the poverty threshold were then registered on the social register of Mauritius. As at now, around 8,000 eligible families in Mauritius and 2,000 eligible families in Rodrigue are on the SRM. They benefit from various schemes such as monthly subsistence allowance, child allowance scheme, school premium scheme, free examination fees scheme, social materials, school materials, and creche scheme. I would like to mention that a total amount of 355 million was disbursed for this scheme during the financial year 2019-2020. I believe that this is a clear indication of our government commitment to help and support those who are vulnerable and need help from the government. I heard Honorable Boulel mention about the creation of the Ministry of Social Integration by the Labour Party. True it is, yes, but who came up with an action plan to help people out of absolute poverty, Mr. Speaker, sir? It is our government who initiated the Marshall Plan Against Poverty in 2016. Families living below the poverty threshold were then registered on the social register of Mauritius. If it were not for us, there would have been no register of vulnerable families. There would have been no financial assistance provided to them. There would have been no tailor-made empowerment programs for them. So I think we are doing our level best to give support to those vulnerable families. As for social housing, the budget 2020-2021 makes provision for the construction of 1,800 housing units for families with an income of up to 10,000. 80% of the costs of these houses will be subsidized by our government. This is an attempt to provide families with housing. My ministry has different housing schemes for eligible families on the SRM. The NEF has already acquired 47 housing units from the NHDC, and procedures for the allocation of houses to beneficiaries are underway. In addition, 136 fully concrete housing units have already completed as at 31st March. Due to the COVID-19 and lockdown situation in Mauritius, the construction of some additional 59 housing units has unfortunately been delayed, but I do hope that in the months to come, we will be able to complete these 59 housing units. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, as you can see, there are a series of measures to accompany the vulnerable families. However, we need to acknowledge that there are other vulnerable families living in relative poverty. I personally believe that these families also deserve our support. To be able to do this, we need to identify the families living in relative poverty. Therefore, the budget 2020-2021 makes provisions for the setting up of a national database of vulnerable families. Once the registration of these families is complete, government will devise an action plan on how to assist these families in improving their living conditions. In the meantime, vulnerable families that are not eligible for the SRM are being taken care of by NGOs. The National Inclusion Foundations provide financial assistance to around 350 NGOs involved in specific areas. I have always believed that NGOs are privileged partners for the government in addressing social issues, and we will continue working together. The budget 2020-2021 makes provisions for an amount of 700 million to be allocated to the National Social Inclusion Foundation for further assistance to NGOs. On another note, Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to comment on a measure taken to support children for vulnerable families in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we all know, schools have had to be temporarily closed to protect our children, but this does not mean that their studies should be stopped, especially those hailing from families eligible under the SRM. These families are often deprived of the necessary facilities for their children to follow online classes dispensed by the Ministry of Education. Our government has given due regard to the educational needs of these children, so provisions has therefore been made in the budget 2020-2021 for tablets to be provided to around 2,570 students of grade 10 to 13 who are eligible under the SRM. I'm sure this measure will enable them to keep up with their studies so that they are in no way at a disadvantage, and needful is being done. So our government's vision is to foster a socially inclusive society. We are doing our best to ensure that vulnerable families benefit from the technological facilities and innovation of today's era. In line with this vision, free access to broadband internet has been provided to around 4,900 SRM families as at March 2020. The present budget makes provisions for free broadband internet access to be provided to an additional 5,000 families falling under the Social Register of Mauritius. This is a huge step in bridging the digital divide and is being implemented jointly by government and the Mauritius Telecom. Mr. Speaker, sir, the last few months have been very challenging for all of us. I'm happy that so far we have been able to brave this situation as one united nation. The present budget has been delivered, as I have said, in an attempt in a very difficult moment and also in an attempt to mitigate the negative effects of COVID-19. On a concluding note, Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to warmly congratulate the Minister of Finance for the presentation of his first budget in the National Assembly. I'm confident that this budget will no doubt pave the way for our economic performance to recover from this unprecedented crisis brought about by the global pandemic COVID-19. Thank you.